talking about what makes you successful in life, relationships, and business. It's Jump, Pivot, and Roll with Shannon Stiles and Rachel Murphy.
Good morning and welcome to Jump, Pivot, and Roll. I'm Shannon Stiles.
And I'm Rachel Murphy.
And I want you to think back. Think about this. August 27th, 2006, in Southwest Colorado. Life changed in a single moment for our guest today when he accidentally executed a 75-foot aerial while riding a 900-pound motorcycle. This stunt left his left arm nearly amputated, a crushed right hand and wrist, a big gaping hole in his right forearm, and a lot of lessons in life. Please welcome today Scot Pierce. How are you, sir?
I am way better than August 27th.
I could imagine. So, I bring that story up, and I know that's not the only time that you actually faced death, but it was one of the times. And I can only imagine that you had so many lessons to resilience during that time. You want to share some of those with our listeners?
Sure. I've thought back over all of the events that have unfolded in my life in the similar scenarios over time, and I think God thinks, "Good grief, dude! How many do-overs do I have to give you? Enough. I have plenty for you to do. Stop, stop with that madness." But on that particular day, I was riding this 900-pound Harley in Southwest Colorado, as you noted, on these windy mountainous roads, and it had been a long day, and I had stopped for a potty stop prior and took off my jacket. Now that was mistake number one, but I left my helmet on, thank goodness. And as I was making a right to left turn over the Dolores River, I missed that turn, and I think what ultimately happened, and you think, how in the world can you fall asleep on a motorcycle? But I did. Right. I dozed off. Now I might have dozed off with my eyes open, but my brain was asleep, and I missed the turn. So I hit that guardrail going about 55 or 60 miles an hour, give or take, and I did that that ejection, no hands, non-purposeful cartwheel down the road. Now fortunately, instead of going over the edge down onto the big boulders below, I stayed up on the highway and tumbled end over end, doing a back handspring for that distance until the guardrail actually stopped me yet again. And that's what caused all the damage. Now, a couple of things that I don't know if I mentioned when I told this story to you some time ago was the first person to stop to assist us was a male in a white pickup truck, and I would guesstimate, as I recall, he was probably in his 30s. Mm-hmm. And I was laying on the road. I could hear him talking to the fellows that I was with, but I couldn't really make out what he was saying. And we were at the point in the wait that we had made the decision, if we don't hear sirens in the next 10 minutes or so, let's turn that truck around and put me in the back and find a town. Because we were an hour or two from any civilization. And the truck turned around and did a U-turn, and I thought, okay, we're executing that plan. And then the truck drove away. And I thought, where did my ride go?
Without you on it.
So my guys say, Scotty P, you're not going to believe this. That guy just told us he's on the FBI's most wanted list.
Oh,
and he can't take you to town because he'll be arrested.
What? Well, you might have just added to his charges had you not made it,
Right.
Holy cow.
And then, of course, sometime later, a rancher and his wife came to our aid because the fellas that I was with rode for about 30 minutes before they basically stumbled upon him at a line shack out in the middle of a field, and there was a telephone in that line shack, and that's where they called for help. So when they returned, this rancher and his wife with a stock trailer followed them back out to the scene. And it was interesting to me that day, as that scene was playing out, that I was with men that I went to church with, and not a one of us had thought to stop and pray. And when the question was asked, hey, is there anything else we need to do that we haven't done for you? Because unknowns to your listeners, I was then a paramedic, a full-time paramedic, right. and I was kind of managing my own care. And I said, well, not really. And it was the rancher who said, I think we ought to pray. I thought, well, that's interesting. And he prayed 3 things for me that day. He prayed that I would not die, and I didn't. He prayed that I would not lose my arm, and I didn't. He prayed that I would be restored, and I am. And so, getting through sort of just the resilience of the event itself, moving forward, I have thought back and pondered on that moment often, sort of trying to figure out, what is it that I'm here for? What am I supposed to be doing that I haven't done yet, or that I've just not discovered, that I don't know what I'm supposed to do yet? And why didn't I succumb to that moment? Why didn't I bleed to death when I should have? And why didn't I lose my arm when I should have? And all of those questions, still all of these years later, still come up. And the only answer, the simplest answer is God just wasn't finished with me yet. He had some plan that I've yet to discover. And I think all of these things that I'm getting to do now are maybe just a small portion of that ultimate plan. And so I just keep chugging.
Wow, this is the first time I have heard this story. So,
yeah.
Wow, we have a miracle sitting next to me.
Well, and Rachel and I believe in don't let your pain go to waste.
Absolutely.
And this is a perfect example of that. But I do want to ask you, so a part of being resilient means overcoming trauma and things like that. My question is, what was harder to overcome? The actual physical ailments that you had, or the psychological part of the pantyhose?
Oh, well.
The pantyhose. What?
Yeah, so when the ambulance does find me, they manage me on the scene. They transport me to the nearest hospital, which was about an hour and 40 minutes, give or take, away, which was Cortez, Colorado, near the Four Corners. And once I got into that emergency room, they couldn't manage me there. And so we made a decision that I needed to go to a level 1 trauma center. And the choice was either go to Albuquerque or to Durango. Now, Durango did have a level 1 trauma center. In fact, Mercy Hospital was only about 2 years old. It was brand new. So I said, hey, we kind of started out there this morning. It would be easy for my family to get there. So let's just go there. So I took about a 20-minute, it took longer to get put into the helicopter than it did to actually take the helicopter ride to, the trauma center. But once I got there and got into the trauma room, as traumas go, everybody's poking and prodding on something. Yes. And I'm taped down to a spine board. I can't move. I'm staring at the ceiling. And I had this sensation that they were tugging on my jeans. When I realized they're tugging on my jeans. When I realized I still have my jeans on. When I realized, oh no, I have some explaining to do. And so I screamed at the top of my lungs, stop. And you could have heard a pin drop. There was no sound, silence. And the trauma doc leaned over me, looking down me, looking back at him, taped down to this board, and he said, Scotty, we're just pulling your jeans off. We're not even going to cut them. And I said, Doc, I don't care if you shred them. They're Levi's and they're soaked with blood, but I have to tell you something first. And he said, okay, with a very surprised look on his face, like, well, this is going to be good. I said, listen, I got out here to ride motorcycles with my pals, and I forgot the riding gear in Wichita. I knew it was going to be cold and that we were going to be up high on the mountain where it was really cold. And so I went to Walmart to get long johns. But, brother, it is August, and there are no long johns to be found in August. But I am a problem solver. So when you take my pantyhose off, just stick them in my boots. And he said, no way. I said, way. He said, how did you know what size to buy? I said, there is a chart on the box. I am 200, 6 foot, 3X queen all day long.
I love it. And I bring up this story not to humiliate you, because you handle it with such grace, but to show how, if you use humor, you can overcome almost anything.
You can.
And it makes for a great story after the fact.
Yeah, levity and humor has really been my life story. It's been my lifeline. It's the reason I'm not a doctor. Because I was too busy trying to entertain and make everyone laugh in every single one of my classes. My teacher-parent conferences could be a broken record from third grade to high school. if Scott would quit trying to make everyone laugh in class, he would be brilliant. And and so I spent my whole life in this world of levity and laughter, and and right, wrong, or indifferent, it has been good for my soul. And I think it's been good for others too, because even in the worst of moments, I'm laying out there, I don't know whether I'm going to lose my arm or not. I'm still finding some way to inject humor into this scenario, if not for myself, if for the angst of anyone else having to manage me, up to and not excluding even when I made it to the OR. Because when they moved me over to the table and got ready to put me to sleep to start surgery, the next day when the trauma surgeon was unwrapping my arm to see his work, he was kind of an older fella, and he was sort of gruff, but he was a straight shooter. I like that about him. Right. He just told me how it was. And he was chuckling a little. And I was still a little groggy from anesthesia. I was in the intensive care unit, and I felt like I'd been steamrolled, And I said, "What are you laughing at?" He said, "Do you remember what you said to us in the OR?" And I said, "I don't remember anything after the trauma room." He said, "Well, you reached up and pushed the mask off your face with your forearm and told the anesthesiologist, 'Hey, while you have me out, put some PEC implants in.'"
Oh, jeez.
I love it.
I looked down. I said, "Please tell me that's not your best work."
That's wonderful. I think that having that natural talent to use humor to make a situation that had to have been highly stressful, highly scary, better for everybody around you is a beautiful, beautiful gift. And look how you're using that now. I mean, you do all these speaking events and you do all of these things, and I'm assuming that humor is something that you use to make the audience feel very comfortable.
Yeah, I think there's a variety of speakers. There are those who just have kind of a canned content, no matter what audience they're in front of, that's their content. They deliver it in the end, and then they sell their books at the end. There are those who kind of hybrid a little bit and kind of have sort of participation from the audience and a canned content and sell their books. My content is very unique in that I customize it to whoever the audience is. I work with the client and I create custom content to get them where they're going. Are you trying to change a behavior, a metric, a behavior, an attitude, whatever that is? And so that I sort of meld into their culture with my silos of content. And then, but very, very important to me is this energy that happens between me and the audience and the participants. And so I do use humor in that 100% of the time. I will land on something that probably someone thinks is a weakness, but it ends up being the humor of the room. And I circle back to it, and everybody enjoys a good laugh, and especially when it's sort of at the expense of a coworker, and it's never personal, and they know that, and it doesn't get so bad that it's like, okay, it's never insulting, but it offers levity to the moment that. I learned a long time ago, there's kind of a formula really, whether we're doing, a podcast or doing radio or doing television or whatever it is. It's a formula. Make them laugh, make them cry, make them scared, or make them want. Now, you can do all four of those things, and you will be memorable for more than 5 minutes. Do none of those things, and they won't remember any of it for 5 minutes.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
So, for the listener out there that we're going through, the world is kind of crazy right now, as you know. And it's times that we don't know what's going to happen next, facing COVID. Lots of people have lost their jobs, and they're facing real difficult times. Some people are losing their homes, just losing everything they worked for. What suggestions would you give someone in a situation like that?
Well, that's a 25-cent question. Plus another 25 cents and maybe even another 20, and maybe a 75-cent question.
I could go for $1.
All right, we'll throw $1 on the table.
Exactly.
Shannon and Rachel, that the the scenarios that we are facing each and every day, they're not necessarily going to go away tomorrow, right? And we have so many things happening at the same time. Our political arena is really tumultuous at the moment. We have a lot of civil unrest around the country. Major cities on fire with rioting and looting and high in crime, and we see shootings and murder going up in some of our major cities. It makes living in Wichita not such a bad thing, right? It feels like to a degree we're kind of isolated from some of that, and I think part of that is our culture, our this Midwest, this Plains culture that we possess. We just don't kind of overreact to those things, and I guess for me, a couple of things, a couple of strategies. One, I turned off the news.
Yes.
I just stopped watching the news. Because if you're on it, it's not generally good news, and what is on it is not generally good news, and I think it breeds a couple of different people. In some of my talks, I talk about this sort of Venn diagram that I use, and it speaks to people having a higher IQ, a higher EQ, emotional quotient, being able to process and navigate the next process of their algorithm, so to speak, but more importantly, combined with people who have a positive outlook on just life, being alive. And when you have the arrows going up in those categories, the arrow going up in IQ, you're always learning. You're a lifelong learner. You're always trying to learn new things and gain ground in that area. When you have a positive EQ, you manage and you respond appropriately to most situations. And when you have a positive outlook, you generally are not a victim.
Right.
You're a victor.
Right.
And there's a very vast difference between those two things. Now, turn the arrows around. You have those arrows going down in those categories, and you find yourself under a white sheet. And that's not a good day for anyone. And you find yourself on the news. And so to really full circle to answer your question, I'd say, look, be studious, learn. Never, 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 never stop learning. You'll learn. You can learn something every day. There's no such thing as not teaching old dog a new trick. That you can teach an old dog a new trick. Exactly. I'm an old dog. I learn new tricks every day. And if I learn the trick and I like it, I'm going to do it more than once. I'll repeat it. So I say, be a lifelong learner. Improve your IQ. Improve your EQ. Don't overreact to things. It's so easy just to have an out-of-body experience to nearly every event that doesn't go well. Sometimes it just doesn't go well. And that's okay, and so much like sport, it's we all like to win, and we all hate to lose. But if you did lose, did you learn something from it?
Exactly. We talk about that.
So
all the time.
if you learned something from it, you didn't lose. Now you might have lost via the scoreboard, but you didn't lose because maybe it will transcend to you putting up a W the next time around. And I think life is much the same way. And then just having an attitude that this transcends all events, what good, bad, or indifferent. And that's why I stopped watching the news, because it's nearly poison of the brain. It rewires your neurons to think negatively about most things, and the next thing you know, you're just a gunchy old thing that no one likes to be around.
Well, there's an agenda that the news has, and I mean, it's very easy to get caught up into that.
Right.
And you lose your focus. You're 100% right. You lose your focus and that light, I believe, when you get caught into.
Well, I think they're trying to control us with fear. Everything is so fearful now. And if everything's so fearful, where's their hope in that? So I think turning off the TV is one of the best ways to just take that out of there.
When the news of COVID-19 came to frame in early March in the United States, I've had people tell me that they were riveted to the news. They leaned into it and couldn't turn it off. They would watch it from the time they got up until they went to bed. And of course, that news was just despair. It was gloom and doom, and we're all going to die. And of course, that's proven not to be the case. And so many retreated to basically hide under the couch from this unknown monster, which turns out to not be such a monster after all. But now they're wired. They rewired their thinking, and they rewired their ability to process. And to date, many of them are still fearful, being fueled by that constant influx of being told, "Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid."
Yeah.
And you have to get out of that trench. You have to rise above it, and look around and realize the sun is still shining today. People are still moving around. There's not gloom and doom and despair anywhere around me at the moment, and
Exactly.
that's a good day. And I'm still free to make many choices. I know we have this this great debate about mandates and what to do, what not to do, but you still possess the ability to make these choices for yourself. And since we're talking about resilience, we are resilient. We were made whole and purposeful by a creator that built resilience into us. Mind, body, and spirit. He made our minds strong to be able to handle the worst of anything. He made our hearts resilient to handle the turmoil that comes when you have heartache, or good and bad, because the heart goes the other direction too, right? It pumps blood when there's a good thing happening.
Right.
And it transcends, I always say this, heart, head, hand, it transcends out through your hands. And if you'll just process it that way, to know that this thing that first captured your heart one way or another transcends to your mind, and what does your mind do to process it? And then it comes out your hands, and now what do you do with it? And what you do with it is what you do with it. What you do with it either is going to take you down a dirt road that's rocky, or take you down the paved road that's smooth.
And you're listening to Jump, Pivot, and Roll. We'll be back after a word from our sponsors.
The Jump, Pivot, and Roll podcast is brought to you in part by the Shannon Styles Allstate Insurance Agency. Just as you take that next step in life, you need to take that next step in protecting yourself, your car, your home, and your family. Reach out to Shannon at 316-773-9864 or shoot her an email at sstyles@allstate.com. Also by Simplify My Life ICT. Is your life cluttered? Do you need help with organization? Rachel Murphy can help. Check out Rachel's services online at simplifymylifeict.com or reach out to Rachel at simplifymylifeict@gmail.com. To keep up with the Jump, Pivot, and Roll podcast, make sure to follow them on their Facebook page. Just go to facebook.com/Jump, Pivot, and Roll. There you can find content, podcasts of the show, discussions with Rachel and Shannon, and more. Plus, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on any of your favorite podcasting sites, from iTunes and Spotify, Google Play to TuneIn, and right on their Podbean site at jumppivotandroll.podbean.com. And for all the exclusive content, make sure to become a VIP member on their Patreon site. Just go to patreon.com/Jump, Pivot, and Roll.
Welcome back to Jump, Pivot, and Roll. I'm Shannon Styles.
And I'm Rachel Murphy.
And today our special guest is Scot Pierce. Scotty P, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to come and share with us. We really appreciate that. Before we went on break, we were talking about how to be more resilient. Your first recommendation was to turn off the news. The second one was to be studious and learn. How important is it to you, and how often do you try to learn new things?
It's like I think it's parallel to being a young adult. When you become a teenager, you kind of think you know a lot, and you don't really know anything, and everybody around you laughs about the fact that you don't really know anything, but you try to act like you do, and you inject in things that you probably shouldn't. And then when you're a young adult, especially in your young 20s, you have the world by the horns, right? And you know it all.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you get into your 30s and you start realizing you don't really know as much as you think you do. And then you get into your 40s and you realize your parents were actually pretty bright. And they did, they were smarter than you ever gave them credit for. And that you still need them for that, that sake of knowledge. And in spite of the fact that I graduated with an undergraduate in the sciences thinking that I knew a lot, I have learned more probably in the last 5 to 7 years than I ever did while I was in my 5 years of college pursuit. Not to say that wasn't a good experience, but my learning and my ability to learn, has ramped up tenfold, 20 years post, because now I'm more interested in things I never dreamed of being interested in. I'm more interested in knowing more about some science things. And since we're talking about COVID, I haven't stopped reading. I'm to the degree I feel like I'm a genuine science geek, that I just keep reading more. And I'm thinking, okay, but because I'm learning more and more and more, I feel good about the fact that, hey, you know what? I just might know more than my physician on this.
That's a good place to be right now.
That's a scary place, but it also brings up another topic, because, we take Google as the Bible. I mean, some people, not all of us, but what we see on the internet or on TV, people think is golden, right? So you somehow have to maintain and balance your learning to make sure that what you're learning is true.
Right. So there's fair balance, and
Yes.
that's a very good point, because there to all things there is a pertinent negative.
Yes.
And you should explore that. That is why I'm never totally against someone that's in opposition of my view.
Correct.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, because what that does for me is gives me the ability to come to the table, hear that vantage point, hear their point of view, combine it with what I believe or not, and then push away from the table, able to make an informed choice about what needs to happen next. For me personally, it may not be the choice for them still. And it seems like we're really hung up in this thing now called cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
I can prove to you that you're wrong, but you are not willing to unhook from that. You're going to die on that hill at all costs, because you've already drawn your line in the sand. And if I could encourage someone to not do that, it's okay if you find out you're wrong, and it's okay to push away from the table and go, you know what? I didn't know that, and now that I do, combined with what I do know, I'm going to make a much better choice.
We just had a podcast on that.
Yeah.
And if you missed that, please go back and listen to it, because that is such an excellent point. When you have to win and you are closed-minded to learning, I don't care if you win, you're still losing, because you're not understanding the other side. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Scott. It's such an important thing.
Especially when it comes to relationships. I mean, I shared on that podcast how I actually lost relationships because I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to prove that I was right. And that's a very dangerous position to be in.
Right, and it's just being fueled by media. It's being fueled by social media. We have drawn boundaries and lines in the sand, to your point, in and around relationships as to what your political platform is.
Yes.
And people are being outspoken more now than ever before, emboldened to be outspoken. And when someone you've known for years, when you find out that they think the way they do, your tendency is to repel them and say, you know what, I don't think we can be friends because we're not on the same page. Yet before I ever knew any of that, we were fine.
Yeah.
And so I've had to kind of sort of dial it down personally. I admit I'll be transparent in that regard and say, you know what, I may not agree with all things that you think or believe, and that's okay. That's okay. It's what makes the earth spin. It's why we have the diversity that we do. And that's okay. You just have to put those things into perspective, and then make personal choices in and around it. And everyone's choice is not going to be the same. We're not all going to vote for the same candidate in November.
And that's okay.
And that's
what
okay.
makes us
Not only okay,
unique and special.
necessary.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if we were all the same, how boring our lives would be? We would have no growth, opportunity to learn and continue.
Now, I had a little tag one time at the end of one of my talks. I said, thank you very much. I'm Scotty P, and I am running for my life.
Love it. I think we all are at this point. The next tip that you gave was don't overreact to things. One of my mentors and Rachel's mentors is Tony Robbins. And he always says, see things as they are, but not worse than. And I think that right now, that is so important to being resilient, because the sky is falling, right? That's the world that we're living in. And how do you balance that? How do you make sure that you're actually seeing it the way it is and not overreacting?
Well, it's a little bit of a learned behavior. I mean, I'd like to say everybody can just do it automatically, but I don't think that's realistic. You kind of have to sort of learn the behavior and then model the behavior and then repeat the behavior over and over. And the very first thing, if you don't do anything else, stop and breathe. Yes. Stop and take a breath and just do nothing for a second or two. When, because we talked about it, I was a full-time paramedic for Sedgwick County EMS for just shy of 18 years. And in that time, you could be on the worst of scenes, and most scenes were chaotic. Right. People just running around and screaming and chickens with their heads cut off. And I used to think, if I am the only one that is calm here today, it's the only way that a positive outcome may or may not happen. Because if I lose my head, I'm going to lose my mind. If I lose my mind, I'm not going to really accomplish the things I need to. And on occasion, I would get accused of being too calm. Like, this is serious, right, and you're not moving fast enough. I said, no, I'm processing. I'm thinking through this algorithm of what needs to happen next. Right. And I talk about it sometimes in my talks, this thing called the algorithm effect, where you're navigating from one box to another box, and that requires a pause, because when you're in this box, before you move left, right, down, or up, you have to take that moment of pause to ponder, what is my next best move? And then once you land on that, all right, execute. Now make that move. And again, back to full circle of that, IQ, EQ, and positive outlook, it makes a difference of winning and not being a victim, or losing and being a victim.
So it sounds like you're very, very intentional about that, and that's the difference for you between reacting and responding.
The only thing that would supersede that is if my pants were on fire. I might run across the room screaming and flailing.
But you'll be
before
okay
you tackle me and roll me on the carpet to get me put out.
Those pantyhose might protect you.
No. So one of the things I really want to know, Scott, because you are kind of a guy after mine and Shannon's own heart, the things that you've been talking about are truly the things that we believe. And so I love learning from like-minded people. What has been your biggest game changer in either a book or a mentor or a lesson learned?
Well, a couple of books that I have read and a couple of authors that I like. You mentioned Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is an incredible inspirer / motivator, yes, and he's got some good books out. John Maxwell has some really good books out. He just has some good principles that are applicable to most life situations, even outside the realm of church management. And then there was a gentleman, a brigadier general named Abrams in the Navy that wrote a book. It's Not My Ship, and he took the worst ship in the Navy and turned it into the best ship in the Navy. Wow. And he did that by simply empowering people that were in charge of that ship, where they had not ever been before. And so he let people do what they do best. And I think, when you surround yourself with people who do what they do best and you let them do what they do best, it sort of feeds itself into concert with what you are doing, and then it all becomes sort of music. And when there's just one way or the highway, that'll get you a little ways, but it won't get you very far. It's just not sustainable. It's not a sustainable model.
We're going to have to check that one out.
Exactly. Speaking of music, you've lived quite a wonderful life, and you were able to actually go sing at the White House, at Carnegie Hall. What was that experience like?
So I grew up, playing an instrument from the 4th grade forward. My cousin was a trumpet player, so I thought that was cool. So I decided to be a trumpet player, and so I learned to play the trumpet, and I played the trumpet in band and in grade school. Then I got into middle school, and I started playing the French horn also. So then I played the trumpet, then the French horn. So I was instrumentalist until I got out of high school. In fact, I'll just tell the truth. I thought vocalists were lame. I thought those lame-os, they're a bunch of weirdos down there down the hall singing. You know, I had no interest in singing whatsoever. You know, I was a hardcore purist to the instrument. And so I fast forward, I got to college. I needed some money. I couldn't go to college without some scholarship help. And so my wife said, you know, you should talk to Dr. Riney at Friends and see if he can help you. And so I did. I made an appointment with Dr. Cecil Riney, who was the director of Singing Quakers. And I went in. He said, well, why don't you vocalize for me? Now, you have to know, in my mind, I'm thinking, I cannot believe I am going to sing for money. And so I vocalized a little bit, and he said, all right, I think you have what it takes. I think I can help you. And so I scored a scholarship, and I got into Singing Quakers. And then we went to we 1 year while I was in school and in Singing Quakers. And, of course, keep in mind, I'm an old guy going back to school. I'm not 20-something. I'm 30-something going back to school. I was the guy that
been there, done that.
I'm the guy that had
Friends.
insurance to drive the van if everybody couldn't fit in the bus.
Exactly.
And so we went to New York 1 year and did a dual concert with the Wichita Symphony Chorus and did the Messiah at Carnegie Hall. Wow. And so I had that opportunity. And then the White House, we were on tour. The Singing Quakers were on tour, and we were in that entire West Virginia and Virginia corridor. And we sang, we were guests of Bob Dole and when he was in office, and Bush Senior, George was in office, and we were guests in the White House, and we sang where they have state dinners now in that hearth room, which was an incredible experience. And of course, that was back when people could still go in the White House. Right. And that was an incredible experience. I stayed on one of the homestays while we were in that corridor. We stayed I'm so sorry that I can't remember the people's name that we stayed with, but we stayed in a house in Upperville, Virginia. It was a 16-bedroom mansion. Wow. Jackie Onassis was a neighbor to one side, and Willard Scott was a neighbor to the other side of these folks. And in their home, I remember calling home, and I said, you're not going to believe what I'm looking at right now. And, of course, the answer back was, well, okay, no, I won't guess it, so tell me. I said, I am looking at the portrait, the half-painted portrait that came out of the White House when it burned, hanging on the wall of these people's home. They are descendants of Molly, what am I going to say? Dolly Madison. And this painting has stayed in their family since, and it's here before it goes to the Smithsonian, and I'm looking at it right now.
Wow.
Goodness
coolest
gracious.
thing ever.
So being in a situation like this, did that push you to become the best you could possibly be? Being what was it? There's usually a key moment in every person's life where they just wake up one day, and for us, it was, we want to live out the best life that God created us to live. What was that defining moment for you?
Well, with transparency, I'm not certain I had it until years later. Mm-hmm. I think I took a lot of that for granted. Yeah. I do know that I stood on one foot and knocked on wood and said, itchy gitchy, I can't believe I get to do this more times than I can count. I can't believe this is actually happening. I can't believe that I'm standing on stage in Carnegie Hall. I can't believe I'm in the White House. I bet I've said that statement 1,000 times. I can't believe. And it wasn't until probably in hindsight when I looked back and thought, well, I guess I can believe it because it did happen. And now the blessings that continue to play out for me have sort of evolved, I think, as a result of some of those experiences, because now it's part of the bigger picture. It's the scope of this picture that has been painted of my life is continuing on. I'd like to believe that my painting is long from done. Now, maybe it is. Maybe it ends today. I don't know. None of us know the answer to that. But if it doesn't, this painting continues, and I think my painting continues. And so I'm always, I guess I'm living out the rest of my days, and I think I've said this to you before. I'll say it again today. I'm just dumb enough to believe that I can do anything, and I'm smart enough to try it once.
Love that.
If it goes well, I'll do it again. If it doesn't go so well, I'll redirect. But it's part of this painting, of this painting of my life. And if I were to die today, if my final day came today and I had the opportunity to see my life flash before me, I hope that I can just look back and say, I at least did one or two things right.
Yeah.
And maybe I changed somebody's life in some way, shape, or form in the right way. Maybe I left the earth better than I came into it in some way, shape, or form. I don't know that I know those answers yet, but I hope that if I ever have the opportunity to see my life flash before me, that I'll be able to say that.
That's beautiful. So you've shared with us kind of how you've jumped and how you've pivoted. So now let's talk about rolling forward. What's next for you? You've done amazing things, but what's your big next move?
Make lots of money.
Touche, my friend. I'll be on that
The
train
root
with
of
you.
all evil. I can make that bad money good money. Trust me.
That's
Exactly.
right. It's all about what you do with
Right.
it, right?
Yeah, and so I guess my desire is ultimately just to do something greater than myself. And if that is to move the chains forward versus backwards in anything I get involved in, whether it's announcing or sports or church or playing an instrument, whatever that looks like, just move the chains forward. Now, maybe it'll only move forward an inch, but at least keep the momentum going that direction. Because if you turn around and look back too long, sure as nothing, you'll find a crack in the sidewalk and you'll trip and fall. So I just keep my eyes forward, and I hope, I know I don't want to sound like I'm getting morbid all of a sudden, but I hope if I die, that when I'm standing before the Lord, I don't think He's going to give it to me, but I really just want to ask Him a couple of questions, and at least one of those, I hope I don't get in trouble for
I can't wait to
broadcasting.
hear
I
it.
know.
One of the questions I go, what was up with the poop thing? Like, certainly you could have designed this better, that we could have done something else with that instead of losing time on the, pot, trying to manage that. I want to know. There had to be a better plan.
There you go.
And the other thing is, I guess just in that lifelong learning is even if you say to me, that you did well, and you were faithful, could I have done something better? Is there just one thing? And I don't think He'll tell me the answer to that, because that might bring sorrow.
Right.
And we know that
Right.
there's no sorrow there,
Right.
which means I'm not looking over the edge. Because if I look over the edge, that's not going to be good for anyone. And if we all get there, if I get there before you or get there after you, or if we get there together, the two of you may be in a much larger house than I'm going to be in.
I don't think so.
I might get the shed on the south end of heaven, on the other side of the tracks. I'll be there, just might not be the same.
I don't think it matters where you are
Right,
when
I
you're in
agree.
heaven, right?
Yeah,
totally
I have
agree.
to agree.
So when you were talking earlier, you said, you took several things for granted. And I flashed back to my son. So my son has been very, very blessed, especially since my husband and I married, because we go to so many different events, and he gets to do things that most kids don't get to do, which he's a young man now. He's not a kid. But he gets to meet individuals that some people would do anything to meet him, right? Is there something that you do now to make sure that every moment you have in those situations, you cherish those moments? Or is it just something that just with age?
It's either a blessing or a curse.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it feels like a curse, because I cannot stop looking around for those opportunities.
Yeah.
My children growing up hated riding in the same car to a restaurant, because when we were done, they wanted to go home. I wanted to talk to everybody in the restaurant. And I would see somebody that I knew. And of course, to live in Wichita means if you know some people, you know a lot of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of people know you. And I love that. It's one of the things I love about Wichita. When people ask me when I travel, they say, "Where are you from?" And I say, "Wichita." It's mind-blowing to me that they respond, "Wichita Falls." And I go, "No, Wichita, Kansas." And then they go, "Well, where's that?" I go,
Right.
that is a place where the cost of living is good, the crime per capita is low, the education system's in good shape, 4 to 6 hours any direction, you're on an awesome vacation. The women are strong, the men are good looking, and the children are above average. And, why not live there?
I want to
love
steal that.
that.
That is amazing.
Why not live
You're
there?
right.
And so I am always, if you put me on an introverted planet, I would die on the spot, because but just secondary to my personality and being an extrovert, I know not a stranger.
Yes.
I will shake a man's hand. I will shake a woman's hand. I will look you in the eye, and I will ask, what do you do? Where are you from? Why do you look the way you look? I just don't know a stranger, and I love that about me, and it works for me. And so I seize the opportunity to know. I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of diverse people,
Right.
all colors, all races, all creeds, all walks of life. Some good, some bad, and it just makes this big melting pot for Scotty P. A magical thing in the end.
Well, Scotty P, thank you so much for being here with us. I do want to kind of open the floor. How do people find you if they want to hear more from you or hire you to speak for them?
Well, it's no secret that I'm this, mega Facebooker. I've got, thousands of friends. My wife will say to me as I'm thumbing through, she'll say, how do you know that person? I said, I don't really, but we have 56 mutual friends, so I must know them somehow.
Exactly.
And so I have lots of Facebook friends. So you could find me on Facebook, and my name is spelled with one T versus two. The second T makes you stutter, so just leave it off of there. So it's Scot, S-C-O-T, Pierce, P-I-E-R-C-E. So you could find me on Facebook, hypothetically. Or, if there's ever any interest in me speaking to your group, whether it's a civic group or a professional group or your business or company, whatever that looks like, you could get to me via Barron Ridge Speakers Agency and contact Mindy East at Barron Ridge. And either of those directions, you'll ultimately get to me one way or another. Or they could contact you. It's not like I can
That's
hide from
right.
either of you. Between Shannon and Rachel, there is no robbing banks from me. Because even though I said don't watch the news, it'll be the one time they did watch the news, and they'll go, we know that guy.
Know him.
That's right. That's right.
So before
Now-
you go, I always
Yes.
issue a challenge. And the challenge today, I actually want you to do that. I want you to think of one thing that you could issue to our listeners as a challenge that you know will move them forward, whatever you want.
So if I could issue a challenge, my challenge would in today's environment, is just find a single opportunity to be kind to someone today. I don't care. Maybe it's only once, but extend kindness and compassion in some way, shape, or form. If you see somebody that has less than you do, is in a tough spot, it's not about did you buy them a hamburger, or did you give them money, or did you give them a ride. Sometimes it's just a hand. Sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes it's just acknowledgement. We are in such a time when people just feel invisible and discarded. And, I guess I would just say, just be kind. And much to our discussion today, you might not agree with where they're at and the way they're living, but that's okay. No one, God didn't put me here to fix the planet. He put me here to be a part of the planet. And if I can be kind to someone today, even if it's just once, maybe the planet was a better place today.
Thank you. That was perfection. I love that.
Life doesn't always come with directions. Sometimes you have to jump, pivot, and roll. We appreciate you listening today, and go out and find Scot Pierce. Scot with one T. Friend him, share his message, because he has a beautiful message to share with the world. And please share out this podcast, because you don't know. You might have someone that you love very much that's finding it hard to find how to become or how to be resilient during hard times right now. So please share this out. Leave us your comments. And until next time, have a great week.
Thanks, guys.